Okay, we're going to test this. Testing, testing. 1 2 1 2. Making sure you can hear me. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to give this about 10 seconds or 15 seconds just to spin up and make sure that we're streaming everywhere. While that's happening, thank you for joining in on this discussion. We appreciate you following the Weather Co-op and becoming part of the community. And if you have not done so already, please follow us on all of the social media accounts that we have, which would include their at Weather Co-op, at Instagram, Facebook, X, Twitch, YouTube especially. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our videos. What that does for the algorithm is incredible, and we certainly would love that support, showing us some love for all of the work that we put in here in the studio. And behind me, you can see our amazing Weather Co-op broadcast studio here in the Bob Dylan Suite at the Beach House on Main Street in Santa Monica, California. A very historic room and a very historic building, and we are so happy to have our studio here to do what we do for you. I am Jay Dubensky, and I am a forecaster, skywarn spotter, storm chaser, severe weather expert. And here with Tropical, we do have some interesting things going on, and we'll get into that. I'll talk about that in depth here and give you a really deep dive discussion into Ernesto, which is gaining strength as a tropical storm. And if you happen to be on, certainly hit us on the chats too, because we do have a lot of stuff here on the multiple monitors, but I can see some of the chats pop up, and I'll look for those and respond as I can. But the main player here, as you can see, is Tropical Storm Ernesto, which is turning and burning, as they say, across what is really the dividing line between the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean. The rough center of the circulation is now positioned nearly over the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I'll show you in a minute here with some of the higher res products exactly how that's going down in real time. But the concern that we have for Ernesto is that it is going to continue to gain strength over the next 48 hours, and then somewhere in the 72-hour range begin to deteriorate and decrease. However, if the steering winds and the trough that's now digging across the northeastern U.S. Continues to hold its position, it's going to steer Ernesto very close, if not right over Bermuda. And that is indicated here. You can actually see it on the tracking map. This is now approximated with our weather forecasting computer for Friday and Saturday. So Friday afternoon through Saturday, it looks like Bermuda is going to get hit pretty hard with this storm. And if it is, strong Cat 2 or even weak Cat 2, frankly, impacting Bermuda, that's going to be the first storm to affect them this year in that nature, and is going to bring some really bad conditions for a great vacation spot this time of the year. There are a lot of people that are taking their cruise ship routes to Bermuda. You think about New England coast, you think about Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Bermuda being some of the most popular destinations this time of the year. And unfortunately, it is not going to be a great time to be out in the water there offshore of the East Coast. And the wave propagation from this storm being at that intensity is going to be pretty rough. You do not want to be in a boat anytime this weekend going up the eastern seaboard. It just would not work out well, and Dramamine is not going to help in that case. But let me get this going here. I got a couple of pause points here on the graphic. Now you can see with a little bit more clarity where that rough center, and I'll show you why we call it dirty. It's down and dirty, or rough. Why it's called a rough center of circulation at this time with Ernesto. But you can see how it's positioned very close, if not now right over the U.S. Virgin Islands. And in one of these other graphics, I have a more clearer image here where I can point out the individual islands to you. But what I can point out to you right now is the island of Puerto Rico right here. And this is Vieques off the coast, eastern coast of Puerto Rico. And this really small, it doesn't even look like an island really, but that's Culebra. Vieques is now a vacation resort spot off of Puerto Rico, but it was for several years, actually a few decades, a testing range and firing range for the U.S. military. So they used to like bomb that island and do all kinds of crazy stuff to it. And a long while back, they stopped and turned it back over to the government of Puerto Rico, and they turned it into just a thriving vacation destination. So a little tip there. The island itself is going to encounter some very heavy rain with Ernesto. The winds won't be all that terrible, especially being on the left front and left rear quadrants of the storm, which are typically if you want to be anywhere when a tropical cyclone comes near you, it's on that side of it. If you divide it into quarters, you want to be on that left side because your wind impacts are typically a lot less. You get out of the strongest gusts, and the sustained winds, although the closer you get to the center, are going to be strong anyway. It's not as bad as it would be if you were especially in the right front quadrant of the storm's path. So the rain will be an issue over Puerto Rico, and one of the items that we look for when it comes to tropical cyclones impacting the islands is that when you get vertical motion, meaning that you get air moving over the mountains, up and over the mountains, okay, you add more lift, and that can tend to, if I can describe this appropriately for you, in essence, it's like taking the sponge or the towel and just wringing it out as this warm, moist air is just catapulted up over the mountain ranges. And in Puerto Rico, we have some really high mountains, and that is going to be an issue with this storm, being that we'll have the moisture from the bands feeding across. And actually, that's happening now. I'll show you on the radar in a little bit. But as the moisture works up and over the mountain ranges in the forests, El Yunque is a large, large forest in Puerto Rico. The activity that happens there, typically, it's a rainforest, El Yunque, and this is going to certainly add a lot of rain to that forest. But the impact for the bands of rain that are going to be associated with Ernesto is going to produce a considerable amount of rain for the island. And it doesn't matter where you are, from Vieques all the way off the left coast there, the east coast, to, you can see on the graphic here, Carolina, which is not that far away from San Juan, very close to it actually. And you can be down in Santa Isabel, which is where my mother-in-law is from. Shout out to my mother-in-law. And just to the west of Santa Isabel, you have Ponce, which is, I believe it's the second largest city in Puerto Rico. And then working across toward the western side of the island, it doesn't really matter where you are. You are going to be impacted by this system, but it's mostly going to be a rain and flooding threat. You get all the way out to the west coast of the island, and you have Isabela and Agadila and Rincon is out there, a few other Salia is out there, some smaller towns, much smaller towns, but they're going to be in the path of this in terms of the rain. Once the storm clears, this is where it becomes interesting because the path takes it, at least it takes it to the east of the Turks and Caicos, and then makes that recurve going up northward toward Bermuda. It is slowly intensifying, and it's going to maintain that intensity because the water out there is pretty warm. I'll show you that in a moment too. And then once we get into the beginning of next week, we're looking at a couple of different spaghetti plots that are now showing some inconsistency in where Ernesto's path may take it. And that has a lot to do with the movement of this trough and the fronts that are coming behind the trough later in the week in terms of being able to steer Ernesto away from the eastern seaboard. But a couple of the plots are now thinking that perhaps there's a bit of a recurve to the west with this by Monday. I don't really agree with that at the moment, but I need another day or two of looking at this to really say for sure. I do agree with this track up until Saturday. I think Bermuda is definitely in the bullseye with this system based on how strong this trough is here with this upper level low that's digging down hard across into the Great Lakes now and is going to pivot its way across New England. That is going to be imagine it like if you ever played bumper pool when you were a kid, or if you were at a mini track. I don't even know if they have those anymore. It shows you how old I am, with bumper cars. This is going to be a bumper, if you will, to kind of stop Ernesto from moving up toward the East Coast with this system. Doesn't always happen that way. Timing is everything, but it's going to keep it away from the coast for now. And Bermuda, like I said, I mean, they're certainly good at taking systems like this head on. The island's always well prepared and well built, and this is not a major system for them. I mean, they've certainly seen much higher wind gusts, but it is going to be strong enough, so they're going to have to worry about it. And I'll show you here also, this is the ocean temperature graphic that I was talking about. You can see how warm this water is here. We're well into the mid 80s in terms of water temperature, and when you move up toward the track of the storm, you can see here that it really doesn't lose thermal assistance, is what I'll call it. It's not going to lose that fetch to the warm water moving up on that path. It's very warm out there. The coolest water is way up, once you get past Nantucket and Martha's, heading up toward Maine and Nova Scotia up there. That's where the water gets really cool. But for now, Ernesto is going to do just fine when it comes to having the latent heat energy feeding off of the ocean water. What is going to impact Ernesto is going to be both the wind flow patterns and staying in an environment where it can just maintain intensity or slowly intensify and not do what you can see from time to time where conditions are so ripe for development that it will just intensify very rapidly, like we saw with Beryl, where you can be dealing with a major hurricane or a Cat 4 or Cat 5 hurricane within a matter of 48 hours, 72 hours. Ernesto is not going to do that. There are too many things in play here in terms of different wind directions with height in the atmosphere. We have some Saharan dust, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, that's impacting Ernesto as well. And unlike what happened just a week or so ago in the Gulf, we have much more dust around that area of development now across the northern Caribbean and the far southern Atlantic, where that does have an impact on the storm development, the individual storm development within the complexes that make up a developing tropical cyclone. So let me show you some of that and what I mean there. I'm going to switch off of a graphic so that I can switch on to another one for you. Let me see if I can get that quickly enough. Yeah, we have it right here. So this is going to be interesting. You don't often see these images come up. This is, let me get this over to you. Yeah, you can see that now. So this is the GOES satellite high-res loop showing Ernesto's circulation, which you can very clearly see there, almost in the center of the screen. To the immediate right of the rough center of that circulation, you can see Puerto Rico, and farther to the west, to the right, you can see the Dominican Republic and Haiti, which is the island of Hispaniola in its totality. And then moving more to the west or westward, you have the smaller island of Jamaica and the much larger island of Cuba. Now, when it comes to the atmosphere, you will always be able to identify elements within the atmosphere if you can look at it from a perspective of taking it in layers. It is like, a sandwich or a lasagna. If you look at the atmosphere in different layers, then this map makes more sense as you watch it loop again and again and again, because your eyes begin to fix on different elements moving within the cloud masses. And to a trained eye, this can tell us an awful lot about where to anticipate storms, where to anticipate calm weather, where to anticipate turbulence, instability. You can read a lot from looking at high-resolution loops like this, and you can see the lower cloud formations underneath the higher cumulus clouds and cirrus clouds, simply by letting the loop play and just focus your eyes on the lower, I'll call them more muted, softer clouds underneath in the stratostack. But you can see the general motion as this loops again and again and again. So, what does that really mean, Jay? What are you trying to explain to us, you might be asking? If you look at the path of Ernesto, you can see it moving already to the northwest. That center cluster, that brightest, whitest area of convective mass, is intensifying because you can see those clouds literally puffing up like marshmallows. That is a sign that the cloud tops are getting higher and higher, and you can see that gradually increasing in size, meaning the storm is growing. But the outer areas of the storm are where the most interesting features happen to be right now. And when you look at a tropical cyclone, you look at it as I always call it, Mother Nature's perfect heat engine. So it sucks up all of this warm, moist air from the surface of the ocean, and that air rises. It creates the initial thunderstorm complex that continues to grow and develop and become an organized area of storminess, and if it develops a low pressure center anywhere within it, or even a elongated low pressure area, then it can mature into a tropical wave, progress into a tropical depression, tropical cyclone, tropical storm, and if left to its own demise, it will become a hurricane, and then gradually weaken when it moves away from the warm water and the support that it needs from the wind and the various layers of the atmosphere. So right now, you can see the engine beginning to warm up. Let's just put it that way. As the center becomes tighter and the storms develop, eventually it forms a very concentrated central area of low pressure. And in a storm that matures to hurricane strength, and sometimes tropical storm strength, you can actually see that defined I, which is the very central area of lowest pressure within the cyclone. Around that, you have the greatest vertical motion. So you have this air just streaming up into the highest levels of the atmosphere. When it gets there, eventually it cools and it condenses and it forms clouds. All right, there's an awful lot more to that scientifically, but let's just go with it for now. And as those clouds and that cooling moisture propagates away from the storm center, you begin to see these wispy cirrus clouds develop well outside of the boundary of the thunderstorm complexes. And that is what we like to refer to as ventilation for the heat engine. That's how the heat escapes into the upper levels of the atmosphere. And it's believed that this is the planet's own way of, in some regards, cooling itself by trying to cool the ocean through this thermal process. What you can see with Ernesto is that it has great support both to the direct north and direct south of the circulation. Those areas are developing quite well. To the far west, you can see that it looks like there's a little bit of a harder time there getting itself organized. And that's because there is some Saharan dust that's out in front of the storm that was able to get out there in front of it. And it's overcoming that drier air that's associated with the dust. On the eastern side of the storm, this is where it's really fascinating, and you don't really see things like this too often, where there is another area of Saharan dust working in from the east, so from east to west. At the same time, there is a relative drier area of air just ahead of that. And the cooling, moist air propagating out from Ernesto is creating these, we call them OFBs, outflow boundaries. And that's what you can see in this almost perfect north to south orientation going down towards South America. And it's incredible to watch this as a student of meteorology and a fan of meteorology and the atmosphere, because as you'll often see, there is new development, new convection that's forming at the intersections of each one of these mini convective waves. So if you see where they curve out, they just bump out a little bit, like a head of broccoli. And where they come together, those inward intersects, you can see the areas of convection shooting those wispy clouds back toward the west. That is kind of like Mother Nature's art. That's something amazing to see, and it doesn't happen very often at that scale. You'll see it with individual thunderstorms where an outflow boundary will get out in front, and new thunderstorms will actually form at the tail end of an outflow boundary. When you're out in the plains storm chasing, that's something that's a really strong consideration. When you're dealing with OFBs and gust fronts, that you know where they are because you can have very rapid development after the initial storms pass if you are on, in most cases, the southern side of those outflow boundaries where they can get back down and you can create even more convection. So this is just interesting to watch. It's not going to um, really affect Ernesto's development, but the curiosity factor is really neat. Saharan dust has both a positive and a negative impact when it comes to what it can do to a tropical cyclone. And the reason I say that is because um, most of the time, what you have happen is the dust itself acts. Let me say that properly. Acts as a condensing nuclei. So we call it's a CCN, and it's almost like cloud. You can say cloud seeding to a degree, Mother Nature's way of doing it, where the condensation nuclei will actually work against the formation of the rising particles and the Bergeron process and collision and coalescence. I mean, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole there, but it can work against the formation of storms more often than work in favor of them. So if you're looking at storm development, tropical cyclone development this time of the year, it's very important to know where those Saharan dust plumes are. And there's normally a pretty ready supply of Saharan dust working across Africa and then across the ocean. But it's only been, since the advent of the newest high-resolution satellites that we've been able to see it in the atmosphere and actually track it. And there are some great tools available now where we can see where the plumes are. And it helps us in forecasting. It's going to be a little bit part player in what happens here with Ernesto for sure. But I wanted to go through that with you and kind of explain what this shows you. I mean, to us, this is, this might as well be a light show, laser light show or something, because it's, a show at Coachella. It's mesmerizing to those of us that study this, and you see so many things in a satellite photo like this. You can see the moisture being pushed across the entire Caribbean and southern Atlantic is firing up these massive afternoon thunderstorms across Cuba, the mountain ranges of Cuba, and you can see those clouds just explode with ferocity there in those last 2 hours especially. Even off of Jamaica there with the mountain range, it's just so mesmerizing to see that. Not so much across Hispaniola right now. There are some off the tip of Haiti, but then you're getting closer to the storm itself, so the moisture is going to begin to form more into the more organized bands. But it's always fun to look at these high-res images. All right, I'm going to go back to the main graphics. Let me get you back here and get you to the radar, because I think that's going to be something that I definitely want to show you. This is I'm going to go to, just give me a moment here and I'll grab this. Last 2 hours, yeah, I'll throw it back. All right, we're going to throw it back and do 6 hours. I think that's going to be effective. So get off the satellite and we'll get over to our radar. Okay, and I have my pointer back, which is wonderful. All right, so now I can give you a breakdown of the islands. Again, this is the Dominican Republic. Actually, I can put that in a pointer too. I don't need the. There we go. All right. So here we have the Dominican Republic, La Romana out here, major resort areas here on the southern and eastern side of the island. And then this is the island of Puerto Rico, as I said, San Juan indicated here. This is Vieques, Culebra, and here we have the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. It looks like this is one big black blob on the map, but there are actually several islands there within that mass. I might be able to, yeah, let's get off of that for a second. I might be able to just pull that in. Yep. All right, this will do it even better. There we go. Ooh, look what we can do at Weather Co-op. All right. So on the bottom here, the larger island, this is St. Croix. So these are all the U.S. Virgin Islands here, and the British Virgin Islands above to the north of the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is St. Thomas here. Across from St. Thomas is St. John through the channel. And then above that, you enter into the British Virgin Islands. So you have Joost van Dyke, Little Joost van Dyke. It's been a while. I should remember these like clockwork. Test, Jay, test. Wow. Okay. I do know those. Nothing about it. Joost van Dyke, Little Joost van Dyke. Gorda. Yeah, the on the far eastern end here. That is Virgin Gorda. It's been a long time. Tortola, of course. This is a very popular tourist area also. St. Thomas, not as popular as it once was. It's a little bit more populated now, densely. St. John is still a great getaway spot. The British Virgin Islands are much smaller, much less population, and pretty beautiful to be sailing around in those islands, frankly. And then when you work way to the east of the Virgin Islands, then you get to, you start running into the islands of like Montserrat, Nieves, St. Kitts, then into the Windward Islands. So as you can see with the radar, and I'll back this out again a little bit. Let me get over here. There we go. Back it out, Jay. There. Okay. So you can tell pretty easily that this is the rough center of Ernesto, right? Rotating through here. As the frames kind of come to an end, you can see, and I'll get the clouds off. Yeah. And the warning, by the way, is for the Virgin Islands and for Puerto Rico. But I'll take that off too. And you can see how the center of Ernesto was there. You can see that there's a rough center spinning here. But with time, the storms around that center are beginning to intensify. See the yellow and the red increasing, especially on that right flank of the center. And at the very end here, you can even see how that center is beginning to clear out. So this low is deepening. It will be showing some type of I-type signature here before too long. And as it goes right over, I mean, this is, like right corner pocket in Poole. This is going right over the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. Thankfully, it's only a tropical storm right now and not a hurricane, so the hit won't be too hard for them. But they really don't need anything like this either. But you can see the rain bands moving across Puerto Rico and propagating from east to west. So the whole island's being impacted by the storm. And right now it's tropical downpours, showers, probably some rumbles of thunder, flashes of lightning with this. But they're still on that outer edge, and I think the dust is having an impact here in terms of the dirty look to Ernesto at the moment. It's definitely trying to wrap some of that into its circulation, and at the same time, there's some drying impact there that's inhibiting it a little bit. So a lot of stuff going on in the atmosphere right now around Ernesto. But gradually, it is going to get its act together. It's going to keep pulling in that air. So again, I don't think you're going to see this go to a 135-mile-an-hour hurricane in 48 hours. It's just not set up that way for Ernesto. All right, historical fact. I should have said it in the beginning. If Ernesto rings a bell to you, that name for a storm, you're not wrong. I was surprised, though, to go through this mental Rolodex up here, and I started thinking about Ernesto. Why isn't that name retired? It certainly rings a bell. And Ernesto was a hurricane 18 years ago, which it can't be 18 years ago, but it is. And almost to the week. I think it was the last week of August in 2006. Ernesto, at that time, formed about 100 miles to the south of where the 2024 Ernesto version 2.0 is forming, and did impact Puerto Rico and the Dominican and Haiti with tropical storm force conditions, and then slowly intensified moving over Cuba and across the Florida Strait, and actually became a Cat 1 hurricane and moved across Florida, then out across the southeast Atlantic, across the southeast U.S. coast, and came back ashore in some degree similar to what just happened a week or two ago here, and moved up through the mountains, the Appalachians, and into the Adirondacks, and dissipated in the northeast. Because it was not a major hurricane, it was not retired as a name. So that's why we have Ernesto 2.0. I'm going to call it that from now on, Ernesto 2.0. And I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, but it is the National Hurricane Center, and they can do what they want to do. If a storm is strong enough to impact in any way, then that name should be retired. So, and that's my belief, but in this case, we have the next version of Ernesto, and it is going to be a much stronger storm than Ernesto from 2006. Okay, let's get into the rest of the country in the continental United States, because we do have some other weather going on, which is of note for sure. Not an awful lot for the majority of the country, but particularly the southeast, where you don't need any more rain. We are seeing some storms firing up across North and South Carolina. You really don't need that. You need to dry out for a while, if anything. And then we have on the southern end of the trough that's pushing down from Canada, we're seeing some storms fire up across mostly Missouri, but those will be moving into Tennessee and Kentucky shortly. So you have to be on the lookout there. I don't see any severe warnings with those, but it'll certainly mess with your plans if you are going to a game or doing something outdoors this evening. And then where we have seen a lot of activity the last several days has been across the Intermountain West, the Desert Southwest, and up into, where are we up here? We're in the Pacific Northwest now, the Intermountain West. There are numerous severe storms forming today with flood warnings, flash flood warnings associated with them. We did have a tornado warning in Idaho earlier today, which don't get too many of those every year. But there was a Doppler indicated rotation in the cell that moved across eastern Idaho. And those storms are still around. There are some storms over Utah. Utah has seen a lot of activity over the last few days. So from St. George all the way up to Salt Lake City and Ogden, you guys are on the lookout for more storms across 15 up through the corridor there and then out across the Wasatch. Once you get into the Rockies, we're seeing a lot of afternoon heating going on there, so we're getting a lot of convection within the mountains. And it is kind of normal this time of the year. Once we start getting that moisture flowing up from Mexico and we get into the monsoonal pattern, you do get afternoon thunderstorms like this. So today will be the case there. New Mexico also, don't want to keep you guys out of the party. Some of those storms will make it into Wyoming and Montana and perhaps into the Dakotas later on into the early evening tonight. But when we get to the West Coast, the immediate West Coast, everything looks pretty good. It's been a pretty nice stretch of weather. The only thing we've had to deal with, and if you've been watching the news, you know this from yesterday, we are having a lot of seismic activity on the West Coast right now. And there are theories going around as to why. I have my own theories there, but we did see a 4.4 earthquake right between South Pasadena and Highland Park yesterday. Now, typically when you have one at that magnitude, you will have a series of aftershocks that may last even for several days thereafter. And we have seen a lot of activity over the last, to 24 hours now, a little over 24 hours. And even today, we've had some fairly decent aftershocks. There was one at about 1:30 p.m. Pacific time that was 1.9, 2.1, and that's something you'll feel under your feet. It's not enough to rattle anything or shake you, but you certainly know it's an earthquake. And here we have, this is the latest minor earthquake that we have on the map, and that's 1.9. So they are continuing to rumble, and you can see out here as you head down toward San Diego, that area also is undergoing some seismic activity right now. And then, of course, there are earthquakes every single day in California, dozens of them. And running up through the San Andreas Fault here, you can see several minor earthquakes over the course of the last 12 hours. But I wanted to touch on that. We don't often go to the earthquake maps here, but with all the attention being paid to yesterday, I thought it would be interesting to show you that. All right, it's one of the multitude of weather that we can give you here at Weather Co-op. So we invite you to, again, follow us. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. We certainly would be grateful for your recommendation to your family and to your friends to follow us as well and become part of the community that is continuing to grow here. And we are certainly grateful for everyone who contributed photos and comments yesterday with the earthquake. Thank you very much for letting us know that you felt it also. For anywhere, right? It was all across Southern California. It was great to hear from people and to hear that they're okay. And of course, if you know anyone in Puerto Rico or the U.S. Virgin Islands right now, you might want to reach out to them. Just check in with them, make sure they're doing okay, make sure they know about what's coming. And especially if you know anyone who's planning a trip to Bermuda for one of the weekend cruises this weekend, if they didn't take the vacation insurance, you might want to give them a hint that they should do that now and give them an out, because unless you spend a full-time career out on the ocean, you are not going to want to be anywhere near Bermuda this weekend. It's not going to work. Sea legs only go so far. All right, that's it for now. We will be back with reports probably sometime tomorrow on Ernesto to give an update on that. But you can certainly stay live on our streaming. We'll keep the tropical map up for you. And if you have any comments, please send them to us. We'll respond as we can. Thanks a lot.